reminding her that our middle son's not here. That's great. Wonderful car ride home. But no, it's always a pleasure to be here. And I was joking. I think actually David said it first, because normally I joke that he invites me to speak and then leaves. So that takes away my first minute or so of talking. I don't have that as fodder. But anyway, it's always great to be down here with you all, and I hope you've had a wonderful summer series so far. It's quickly, almost all too quickly, coming to an end. If the youth were still here, they'd say amen. But we will be in John 14, and we're going to jump over to Luke 14 tonight as well, and a couple other places. But we are going to be talking about that statement: I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. No one. Man, that's kind of an exclusive statement, isn't it? Isn't that kind of, sometimes in our culture today, somebody, they look at that and they think, well, what do you mean no one, right? What do you mean you're the only way? That just doesn't seem right. Here's what sometimes you hear: that doesn't feel right. But it's what Jesus says. It's what Jesus says. I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. And I'm kind of reminded of C.S. Lewis when he said, either Jesus is a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. It's got to be one of them. And he can't just be a guy that had good teachings and things because of statements like this. And I'm sure some of the other I am statements that you have talked about this summer. But you can't say something like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And then, in just a little bit later there, he starts talking about, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He is making the claim, and he's being bold about it. And so as we think about that, it made me think, on the way here tonight, right? We came and we went to Four Rivers first, because anytime I leave Mount Dora and come down this way, I like to stop at Four Rivers. Some of you know Dan Backus. He used to be here. Dan is a jerk. He sold his barbecue place, okay? And I've told Dan that wasn't very nice. He wasn't thinking of his Christian brothers. He was just thinking of his own selfish retirement. And that's Kenny's dad, for those of you that don't know. But so I have to get my barbecue somewhere else. But how did I get there? Because I usually don't come to the Four Rivers that's over this way. I used my Google Maps. Okay, I used my Google Maps. And then to get from there here, I used my Google Maps. But as I was pulling out, the Google Maps was taking me left back to I-4. And I thought to myself, I don't want to get back on I-4. I know if I just go right, eventually I'll be able to turn and get somewhere else. And so I went a different way. Why? Because, I don't know, anybody out there that use Google Maps and you think you know better? Mainly I'm looking at the wives that are now staring at their husbands, like, it's telling you to go that way. I mean, we did that last night. We were going to Orange Avenue, had some softball games in the softball field, and it's telling me to go this way, and I'm like, nah, this way's faster. And we do that a lot in life, don't we? And I think more than we really want to admit, when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the light, no one comes to the Father except through me, there's times where we go, I know you're the way, but I want to go this way. I want to go that way. I think last time I was here, we talked a little bit about that. How it's important to make sure that we're following His will. And as he makes that statement, that's what it is. Because here's the thing: Satan is great at distracting, isn't he? I mean, Satan is alive and well, and he is great at distracting. In fact, I think it's one of his greatest weapons, is just simply coming in and not trying to make anyone necessarily a bad person. He certainly has his heyday doing that too. But just distracting people trying to do the right thing. Look over at Luke 14. We'll come back to John 14. But jump over to Luke 14. This is the parable where he's coming in and he's just talking to them about priorities and misplaced priorities. Being distracted with things. He starts off in Luke 14 talking about self. He talks about making sure that you don't misplace priorities when you're trying to take care of those who are disadvantaged. And then he gets down to the parable of the Great Supper, starting in verse 15. If you would, read with me just a little bit. It says, "Now when one of those who sat at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, 'Blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God.' And then he said to him, 'A certain man gave a great supper and invited many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, Come, for all things are ready. But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, I have bought a piece of ground. I've bought a possession. I've got to work it. I've got to till it. I've got to go inspect it. I bought something, and I need to go check it out. The second one said this. He said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask that you have me excused. Okay, I bought some oxen. I've got this job to do, and they're not going to test themselves. I got to go out and make sure that they know how to work. And then he said, still another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. Not going to make a joke there. Just, he's married a wife. He has relationships. So we have possessions, we have careers, we have relationships. Satan distracts us with a lot of things in a lot of different ways. Not all bad, some great. Relationships are a blessing from God. Our careers and things to do and things we have are blessings from God. And yet Jesus says, be careful here. And he goes on to say, the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and the lanes of the city and bring in here the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room. Then the master said to the servant, go out into the highways and the hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper. So the master became angry, and in this parable, who is the master? It's God. Notice he became angry. God sometimes gets angry. That's why Jesus is so bold in making a statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life, because I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And yet he makes that statement, and a lot of people, I don't know about that. I've got this to do. I've got that to do. I've got these things to do. All of these things, and God says, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to bring in others. And then he follows up with this, where he goes into this idea of you've got to hate your father and your mother, your brother and your sister. And a lot of people, of course, take that and they're like, oh, look at this contradiction. Not only is this guy exclusive, but he talks out of both sides of his mouth, because we know the 10 Commandments, and then there's other places. We look at Ephesians, we look at Colossians. Children are supposed to do what? Honor and obey their parents. And he's telling them here, he goes on there in verse 25, now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. what is this guy? He thinks he's the only way, and he's telling us we got to love, but he's also telling us we got to hate. And it's right after he gets done talking about the importance of, listen, I know it's easy to get distracted. And you think you got this that's important? I mean, the guy that bought the piece of land, was he trying to be nefarious? He just thought he had something else he really needed to do. And the guy that just got the oxen, I mean, they probably need work some. You know, you got animals, you're supposed to take care of them. Okay, right? He wasn't trying to be nefarious or belligerent in any way. He just thought he had something more important to do. And the guy that just got married, he thought he had something more important to invest in. I just got married. This is important. Is marriage important? If you get married, spend time with your spouse, okay? Let me see some head nods. Yes, that's an important relationship. It's a blessing from God. But that's why Jesus comes in here and he says, but wait. Let me tell you what's most important. Because I feel like he could have inserted it here, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. When we think about hate, think about over in Genesis, when we know the story of Jacob. You got Jacob and Esau, and then Jacob goes out, and he goes to the far-off country, and he comes and he sees Rachel, right? And what does he think? That's worth 7 years. Okay, that's what he thinks. Think about 7 years. 7 years. Okay. 4 years of high school took how long? At the time, forever. We look back now and we're like, oh, that was nothing, right? 4 years of college, right? Some of us took 7 years. But, that's a long time. And he gets to the 7 years, and he gets Leah, right? And what does he say? I don't know about you, but I might have been like, 7 years. That's all I got, I guess. Rachel, he said, I'm going to go 7 more. 14 years. Okay, 14 years he puts in. And we read there where it says, he went in and he loved Leah, right? And it says how he loved her more. In fact, there in my notes, I wrote this way too small, so I got to pull these out. But it says this in Genesis 29. It says, Jacob also went to Rachel, and he also loved Rachel more than Leah. Yet in the next verse, the Bible says this. It says, and when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb. So he loved Rachel more than he loved Leah, right? But then it says, when he saw she was hated. Did it say that he hated her? No, it's just he loved Rachel more. And in the same way, as Jesus is talking here, just after he gets done telling them, listen, I know you got a lot of distractions in life. I get it. I came to this earth. I lived as a man. I understand the temptations and the pressures and the different things going on. I understand that you have relationships. I understand that you have careers. I understand that you have possessions and these things. But you've got to love me more. You've got to love me more than that relationship with your father, your mother, and your spouse, and your children. If you don't love me more than them, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And so he lays that out, and he puts it out here. And I go back to John 14, and I think, I think sometimes in my own life, as I'm thinking about this, and I wrote this in my Bible, so I read it and I remember it. I think we all need a check sometimes. Your problem is you think Jesus needs you when others know they need Jesus. We can't think that Jesus needs us more than we need him. He is the way, the truth, and the life. I need him more than anything. I need him more than my relationships. I need him more than my career. I need him more than the things that he's blessed me with, the opportunities that he's blessed me with. I need him more than anything. It's important that as we process and as we think, sometimes we get caught up in, man, so-and-so doesn't make good decisions, right? It's always so much. I mean, you've heard the when you're pointing at somebody else, there's really 3 fingers pointing back at you, okay? And we know that, but we forget that. We know that, but so often it's so easy to look and think, if I could only make decisions for them. And it's even harder when they're close to us and we love someone. Children, spouse, parents. And we get caught up chasing something that wasn't ours in the first place. It's God's. And every individual has to make those choices for themselves. When Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, he is talking directly to me. He is talking directly to you. You've got to have yourself right, or it doesn't make any difference what other relationships, jobs, careers, things are going on in your life. It just doesn't. And as I make decisions for me, the goal in that is what? The goal is if I am aligning myself to God's will and I'm aligning myself to following Jesus to the best of my ability, then the decisions I make will have an impact on other people, but I can't make a decision for any other person but me. And a lot of times, especially, we think this as kids, but kids really know it's not true. But a lot of times as adult, we think we have to make decisions for other people. And we think that we're supposed to. And then if other people don't allow us to make decisions for them, we get frustrated. And I just always think of Jesus himself and his own apostles, right? He spent 3 years teaching them. And then they all scattered. And I wonder if he thought, man, why won't they just let me make the decision? I don't think he did. I think he knew it was their decisions. And I think he knew that he had laid the foundation and the seed. And I think he knew that he wasn't a failure. If I had a school where for 3 years I had 12 people that I taught, and then at the moment that was most critical, they all ran away, by worldly standards, you'd say I'd what? Failed. I'd failed. I am the way, the truth, and the life. They all scatter. See, we just got to look at things differently sometimes. And we don't always have the full picture. And we get so caught up in relationships, and I'm not even talking about possessions or work and the other distractions that are meant. We get so caught up in relationships that become so distracting because we're chasing something that it's not our place to make the decision anyway. And that's really hard. And that's tough. But it's up to every individual, and so therefore it's up to me to make the choices for me. And that's hard to do. But that's why right before he gets into this, where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, what does he say in chapter 13 here? Look back in chapter 13. Right here at the end, he says, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, and that you also love one another. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. He says, listen, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I love you. I've given my life for you. To them, he's thinking, I'm going to give my life for you. And I want you to go out and I want you to love others because you love me. If we don't put Jesus first, if we don't hate everyone else compared to Jesus, meaning we love less compared to Jesus, it's amazing how quick and how tough it gets to love other people, right? It's hard. It's hard. And so Jesus says, listen, I want you to love like I love. And then he goes in to say, listen, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You're not going to be able to do that unless you're giving yourself to me. And that's why he comes along in Luke 14. And then we see other places where he talks about the importance of following him, putting him first. It's not because he's egotistical. It's because he knows with boldness. I used to say in youth ministry, when people would say, what's the hardest thing about youth ministry? I used to say, the hardest thing about youth ministry is I can't make decisions for the kids. Man, I wish I could. Because teenagers are knuckleheads, right? And but you know what? At the same time, I didn't want to make all the decisions. And that's when I go back to that idea of, if I had all the power of God, would I do some things differently? Yeah, I think I probably would. But I had all his power and all his wisdom, I'd leave it just as it is. A statement like this seems very exclusive. It seems very counter to what we're told over and over and over again. But it is so true. And the question for us each and every day is, do we believe it? Do you believe, as you sit there tonight, and you can answer this one of two ways. There's not a third option. Do you believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through him? If you do, man, I hope you don't keep that to yourself. That's what I want you to take from tonight. Don't keep that to yourself, because it's a powerful message. It's as Romans 1 says, it's the power of salvation behind that message. If you don't, I encourage you to pray about it and think about it and study it. And if you have those in your life that you know don't, but you do, I encourage you to think about how can you impact that? How can you share that? It may be uncomfortable, but what's the alternative? Jesus is saying he's the only way. He's the only way. As we think about that and as we go out, I pray that you pray about it and you think about it. Again, I'm glad I was able to come and share that tonight. And again, I just want to state that it's something that I personally continue to work on. I think it's something that all of us can continue to work on each and every day. As you're thinking on that question, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you have something and you have someone on your heart, I encourage you to pray about it right where you are. If you have something that you need to share,